Welcome to the Jewish Education Experience podcast with your hosts, Yasmina and Ari, who will be uncovering gems of wisdom with Jewish educators from around the world.
To our audience, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, and we appreciate you sharing our podcast with others also. Please consider supporting our podcast financially by contributing via Zelle, jewisheducationpodcast@gmail.com, or by joining our Patreon community, www.patreon.com/Jewish Education Experience Podcast. And to all of you Jewish educators and students of Jewish education around the world, chizchu ve'imtzu. May you be strengthened and encouraged in your holy endeavors. Please remember to hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast may not necessarily be those of the hosts. Our guest today is Jacqueline Rafii, and Jacqueline Jackie, she is the cantor at Shomrei Torah Synagogue in West Hills, California, where she develops and directs all musical programming, creative prayer experiences, and music education. Cantor Rafii had a previous career as an entertainment lawyer before switching career paths and following her calling. She is a Wexner Graduate Fellow, and as part of her master's thesis, collected and notated Persian-Jewish prayer melodies to bring awareness to global Jewish music. So we're going to find out more about that, by the way. And she is a composer and pianist and sings in 5 languages. Wow, that's really amazing.
Thank you.
Well, Jackie, hello, and welcome to our podcast. And thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's dive right in. Will you please tell us a bit more about yourself and how you began your journey in education?
Sure. So I was raised in Los Angeles, and I'm a first-generation American. My parents, many generations before them, are from Iran. So, like many others who I imagine experience juggling multiple identities. It's kind of what I've done my whole life. Jewish, American, Persian woman, and that's probably informed, the way that I see things. And I was just ordained as a cantor a week and a half ago from the Academy for Jewish Religion, California. But I began my career as an entertainment lawyer. I went to UCLA Law, and I practiced law for a few years and then switched over. But for me, teaching education began with music. Not only my own education in music, which began when I was 4, but also like my first paying job was teaching piano and singing lessons. And I just so connected with that, and it really informed my teaching going forward. And a big part of being a cantor is education. Not only music education, Judaic education, all kinds of education, but that's where it started. And then in law school, actually, there was a class called Street Law, where I went to a local high school and taught juniors and seniors law once a week. And that was like one of my favorite classes in all of law school. So
that sounds really interesting, actually.
It was very, very cool. And the students, it was a cool experience for them also to be exposed to a subject that, normally they wouldn't learn about.
That's so cool. I'm very curious. How did you make the jump or the shift from law to education?
It's a great question. I always felt in my heart that I wanted to be a cantor, an educator. Being an educator is so integral to being a cantor. And so being a cantor was really in my heart for a long time. But for, a variety of reasons, I went to law school and became a lawyer and thought that was maybe a more secure path. And, it was also an interest of mine, but there was a clear calling in the other direction. So 4 years ago, the place where I went to cantorial school, AJRCA, is a really amazing, speaking of education, a really amazing educational institution because it allows flexibility for people who work or who have families to attend school part-time, to attend remotely.
That's amazing. It's needed.
It's needed, yeah. And really, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but I really think that has accessibility to education especially through the virtual realm, has really transformed, I think, the way people learn and the way people are able to move forward in life. So that allowed me to take classes while I was practicing law, essentially in law school, practicing law. Even before that, I was able to take some classes at AJRCA, and then this opportunity at Shomrei Torah Synagogue, where I'm now the cantor, was kind of like a shidduch, like a match,
Right.
where they were looking for someone, and I was looking also for this career change, and it just worked out, and I became their cantorial soloist and left law, took this leap to a new field and kind of dove right in, into the fire. And it's been such a wonderful experience and so wonderful. And I've had so many opportunities to teach at Shomrei Torah, and it's been a real true blessing.
How do you tie in being a cantor with educating students? How does that tie together?
So there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that are inherent in terms of the cantorial, like the typical cantorial job role involves a very active role in B'nai Mitzvah training, whether that means, actually one-on-one training students or running or directing the B'nai Mitzvah program and overseeing other trainers. A big part of Jewish life cycle events and that, I think has a big impact on kids' lives is the bar bat mitzvah process. So at Shomrei Torah, I oversee that whole process, and I run the program and work with, oversee the trainers and also train some students. So that's a part. And then also the clergy and the cantor and rabbi roles have been merging over the years and decades. And there's a lot of flexibility between those two. So as a cantor, you can be an adult educator easily. So I teach adult education classes as well. And love teaching. I'm going to teach a class on the female prophets of the Tanakh.
Oh, that is really cool.
Thank you. End of this month, starting on Wednesdays on Zoom, and everyone's welcome, by the way. So,
I have to get that. We'll have to get that link from you for sure.
It'd be my pleasure, of course. Of course.
Now, I am very curious too how you incorporate your Persian background into your music and what you teach and educating others. How do you do that?
Yeah, totally. So when I mentioned earlier that like these multiple identities kind of influence the way I see things, what I was referring to was kind of like I think sometime the way that I grew up, I grew up at a beautiful synagogue, Wilshire Boulevard Temple. And I think we were told that we were the first Persian family to join, which was really cool. But also just kind of, I grew up in like what I call like an Ashkenormative environment where Ashkenazi Judaism was the norm. And in many, not all, but many seminaries, Jewish seminaries across the country, the norm of what's taught in terms of music and repertoire and nusach is, Ashkenazic. And that is that's just by nature the majority of Jewish America. So I think that there's a lot of value in bringing different sounds and cultures and traditions into the offering, into the menu of what we offer in our educational and musical programs. And we can be really enriched by learning about the different cultures within the Jewish family. And by the way, I love Ashkenazi culture and I love singing in Yiddish. And I think I myself am enriched, learning about that culture. And so I think so too, when we realize how diverse we are as Jews and how we've inherited so many of the customs of the lands that we've, lived in for so many centuries around the world, we are all enriched by that, and we're all connected and united, I think, even in our difference. And so that, that's what being a Persian Jew has kind of inspired me to do. And my master's thesis was on Persian-Jewish music. So, it's never been, to my knowledge, notated before. These melodies haven't been written down into sheet music because it's an oral tradition, right? It's passed down orally. So, Sephardic music has thankfully been notated, has been started to be notated, and there's some songbooks out there. But Persian-Jewish music, I couldn't really find any, so I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. So I interviewed people who learned melodies. They grew up in Iran. They learned these melodies, and I notated some of them and put them in my thesis, and also compared Persian-Jewish musical modes with like Arabic musical modes and Ashkenazic synagogue modes, and it was kind of like this thesis highlighting Persian-Jewish music, which is endangered, but also kind of celebrating and our diversity and the way we can unify around that.
I love that you are helping to really reach out and bring awareness to the fact that many of us have different backgrounds, that we all have different family backgrounds, different countries, and different traditions. And so it's important, I think, to really share that with others. And you do it through a musical way, which I think is really cool.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. We'll have to check out some of your music for sure.
Thank you so much. I have a website, so it's a lot of it is there. Just my name, JacquelineRafii.com, and YouTube. You can YouTube my name as well, and all my music is there.
Okay, awesome. We'll definitely put that in the show notes when we go back and take this up and make this interview live. We will definitely add that.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'm curious, in your role, how you talk about God with the various age groups that you work with, or even within your music.
Oh, this is such a good question, Yasmina. It's such a good question. It's something I think about so much, and I almost feel like, I don't know if you feel this way as an educator, but like, I almost feel like it's like taboo to say God too much in modern society, at least among the my demographic of like 30s and younger demographics, even 20s and teens. I think it's kind of like almost a turnoff sometimes.
It is.
Right? To say God.
I feel that way too.
Do you? Yeah,
I do.
I'm curious to hear your theory of why. My theory is yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if our generation, and I don't know if this is right at all by any means, but if our generation has become so tied to the physical things that we do, or the scientific background that we're all fortunate to experience, all these scientific advancements. And so sometimes it's hard to remember that it's not just our success, that we've really been given this success. Like, God has kind of helped us to be able to do so many of these things.
Mm-hmm. I
don't know at all if that is right, but that's kind of what I think. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that I think that the image of God, like the biblical image of God, is this like anthropomorphic human-like big guy in the sky, has kind of like shaped the way that the majority of society sees God. And I just think that doesn't really resonate with younger generations. It certainly does not resonate with me to see God in the way that, this God of reward and punishment, and an angry or jealous or, God who's not necessarily, again, reading the Bible from my experience, reading the Tanakh, like literally, that image of God, I think, is not resonating. And so I think that's one. And to your point, I think also the American motto of like rugged individualism and kind of independence, autonomy, which I think is admirable. And I think it's awesome to be self-made and to work hard and to have a good work ethic. But, I do think that having God, or awareness of God, or a relationship with God, can definitely bring humility and can bring an awareness of like the great miracles around us that we really had nothing to do with whatsoever. I think I really resonate with, when I'm talking about God, I really resonate with the Jewish idea that we're made b'tselem Elohim, we're made in the image of God, and the teaching that we must be holy because God is holy. So it's a continuous striving to be more full of compassion, more full of love, more full of goodness, and just to be holy. It just encourages us to really transcend some of our baser inclinations. And I think that connection, that spark of connection between all matter, all living or non-living matter, that spark of connection, I think that really, to me, feels more, it just feels that it resonates more. So when I sing about God, or when I talk about God, I think God is so integral to our tradition and to our prayer. And I think there's so many ways to interpret when we say the word God, or when we say it in Hebrew in the many different names of God. There's so many ways to interpret that. So as educators, I think we can empower people to expand their understanding of God, what that means, how they can build a relationship with God, and that kind of expansive openness, I think, allows for God to enter the conversation more, instead of
I
being.
think so too.
Yeah.
And I think it's, like you said, important to recognize that God wants us to be holy, and if we are doing holy things, we're allowing God into our lives, and we're made in the image of God. So if God is holy, and we believe God is holy, so if we're doing holy things, then we're essentially like that. I definitely agree with that. So
Yeah.
Curious what your thoughts are on education in general, because we tend, the Hebrew word for education is chinuch, and some people would say maybe it's more of an amorphous term. What does that really mean? How would you define it?
I think education is the kind of environment that you create, and I think that the most effective education is a safe, engaging, open, pluralistic environment that encourages exploration and questioning and challenging. I think any kind of environment that's stifling, or that's my way or the highway, I think is not conducive to building the most expansive and richest kind of education. And actually AJRCA, where I went to Cantor School, which is also a rabbinical and chaplaincy and Masters of Jewish in Jewish Studies school, it's a pluralistic school. It's one of the few pluralistic seminaries, and I felt so much more. I felt like my education was really strengthened to have those kinds of different perspectives, and to be able to, have healthy debates and disagreements with students, professors. It felt like the environment created allowed for a very expansive type of education. So that's how I would define it.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely see that.
I'm curious how you see chinuch as coloring your definition of education.
I think it's the experience, not just having the teacher educator sitting in the front of the classroom listing off or lecturing, giving that student the ability to really learn without it being that face forward teacher just lecturing.
Totally.
Sometimes I think in Hebrew school in particular, I mean, that's been my background. I grew up going to Hebrew school, and I've taught in several Hebrew schools, and I think sometimes it could be a little bit too lecture focused.
Can we go on a tangent here for a second and talk about Hebrew school?
Sure. Sure.
I don't know your experience, but I'm finding really sadly that many of the people that are my age now, I talk to them and they say, oh, I hated Hebrew school growing up. I had to go. I was forced to go. I hated it.
Yeah.
And then also, I teach, part of the job is teaching Hebrew school. And some of the students just, no matter how much time and effort you put into making a lesson super engaging and fun, some kids will love it, but some kids just don't want to be there. It's elective. Yeah, it's elective education. And even I'll say the bar and bat mitzvah process, a lot of the kids, most of the kids don't know what they're reading. They don't understand. They know how to read and decode Hebrew letters, but they don't comprehend what they're reading. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are. How do we make religious school and Hebrew school fun and engaging and make kids excited to be Jewish, and not it's something their parents are forcing them to do, and then as soon as they have a bar bat mitzvah, they're out of there and they never step foot again.
I feel like this ties into the next question that we typically ask about the biggest challenge. I think a lot of the Hebrew school or religious school educators that we have interviewed have mentioned, how do we engage these students, first of all? And then how do we keep them engaged so that they want to continue learning and just even want to continue being Jewish in their future?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think we figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
I also, I guess I was quite the anomaly. I always loved going to Hebrew school. I always enjoyed learning.
Me too.
But my parents were also always learning. So I guess I had that example. I definitely think the home plays a big part. Do you find that to be the biggest challenge you faced as an educator or even as a cantor?
I think that there is a really fine line. There's this balance between tradition and innovation. And I always try to walk that balance sensitively. But I think it's a really exciting balance if you get it right, because so much of Judaism is based in tradition, but I also firmly believe that if tradition doesn't change, then it fossilizes and it dies. You have to change with the times. I mean, there's no other way to survive. You have to adapt. You have to change. And Judaism historically has adapted. And that's,
For sure.
that's I think one of the ingredients to its great success and wisdom. So I think the biggest challenge that I find that I want to rise to this challenge is, how do I be part of, in a sensitive and respectful way, a movement of like adaptive Judaism, where it's remaining relevant to the younger generations while still remaining, having its integrity in
Right.
Jewish tradition. And I really think that's why Torah is one of the reasons that we call Torah a tree of life. Why does it keep surviving through the generations? Is because, educators throughout the centuries, the millennia, we read Torah every year and we find a way to make the parasha relevant to what's going on in the world. And so how do we do that for kids? I think, I don't want to sound like, I don't know how extreme is the right extremity to go, but maybe Hebrew school can be more experimental, and there can be, if somebody says, hey, like, the bar bat mitzvah doesn't resonate with me at all, but like, I'm super into a mitzvah project. Like, what would happen if that child ran a huge mitzvah project and inspired a bunch of other kids to do a mitzvah, and like that was their induction into adulthood, and then they walked away from their bar bat mitzvah like with a lot of passion and joy for being Jewish, and that was their connection to Judaism. Now, we would say, well, but they didn't learn the prayers and they didn't learn these parts that are integral to being Jewish. And I think that could be, some would find that very problematic. And, maybe I'm also mixed about it, but I don't know. Do we tailor a bar and bat mitzvah to what somebody loves because that'll keep them connected? Or do we,
Right.
these are the kinds of things I'm struggling with. It's like, how much do
Hard.
you push the
Yeah,
envelope? Yeah, exactly.
for sure. Yeah, I definitely think our challenges are cut out for us. So
Yeah.
how do you stay motivated?
When I continue to learn and expose myself to new subjects, it inspires me to want to continue to teach. My motivation is continuing to learn.
I love that.
You stay motivated.
Also, by continuing to learn, talking with other educators.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Curious, what advice would you give to new educators who are just getting started?
I would say you learn best by doing. So throw yourself into the ring, experiment, teach, try new ways of educating. And teaching is procedural, just like in a lot of ways in some ways learning is procedural, but teaching is a skill. There's only so much like theory, right, about education that you can learn. You have to eventually just
Get
throw
in there.
yourself in there and see what works.
That's
Learn by
true.
doing.
And we're going to make mistakes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's good advice. That's good advice. Definitely. You're going to make mistakes. Don't be so hard on yourself. Just learn from what happened and move on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're hoping that also with this podcast that it kind of gets that conversation going and maybe gives new educators that chizuk, that strength to push through and continue, because the first year could be difficult when you're just thrown into the classroom and figuring out, teaching and educating, but also handling maybe some behavioral things that might come up in the classroom, because kids have their moments, right? And
Totally.
just get in there though and do it, and probably be in touch with other educators and get that support.
Yes.
So
Yes, exactly.
now, you mentioned before about Torah. How do you think we can best help our students build a proper Torah foundation?
I think it's similar to what we were talking about before. I think we got to keep it relevant for them and make it relevant to their lives today. As we move farther and farther away from, the 3,000 years ago, 3,000 plus years ago, when our tradition teaches that, Torah was received, as we move farther away from that civilization, that culture, and life changes so much, I think we need to, the Torah is full of wisdom, and I think the beauty of it is that it is adaptable and it is relevant. It has these fun, it has these teachings and values that are timeless. So because of that, I think that it's our job as educators to make it relevant and to find ways to creatively show how Torah is relevant in our lives today.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think successful Jewish education would look like in the future?
Ooh, that is a challenging question. I think I would tie it to your previous question. I think it's got to be able to adapt. I think Jewish education has to be adaptable. The way that with the pandemic, virtual education really took off, and I can say in our synagogue, the rabbi and myself, we have so many more attendees in our virtual classes now because people can join from home.
Right.
Which is awesome. And, things, of course, as we're transitioning back to in-person kinds of gatherings and educational things, I do think that this virtual education is really going to stick. And so I think Jewish education needs to adapt to whatever's happening, and it needs to, I think, should be constantly reinventing itself and staying fresh and, having new modalities to remain engaging and to keep students engaged.
Definitely. What do you think that means for Hebrew school education? Do you think it's something that's probably always going to be around? Do you think it might kind of start to dwindle and maybe turn into something else?
I think it's easy to look at Hebrew school education and the evolution of it and say, hey, it used to be 3 days a week. Now it's 2 days, and now it's 1 day. And it's, I think an instinct, even my instinct, is to be like, oh my gosh, is it going to disappear? It's getting diluted to 1 day a week. What can you learn in 1 day a week? But maybe we look at it not as, a tragedy, but as a challenge to see okay, so society and education is changing. How do we tackle this change? So how do we make, if it's, we have to think about, why has it become 1 day a week? Is it because kids are getting involved in lots of other extracurriculars? Is it because, so I think there has to be some exploration as to why, and then to, again, adapt and be flexible and say, well, if Jewish education is no longer going to be the model of 3 days of religious school, what if it's a bigger investment in some kind of sleepaway experience in Hebrew school, where you go on a trip, or a lot of resources are poured into a trip to Israel, or a lot of resources are poured into camp, or, I think we just have to think about what is speaking to and resonating with youth, and then approach it from that perspective. Maybe the 3 days a week model, even though, it's a very rich model and you get 3 days a week education, but maybe that doesn't work today, not because kids are not interested in Judaism, but because that model is no longer, effective in society because of the way society has changed. So I think I feel optimistic that there's still a way to provide a rich Jewish education. We just have to think on our feet.
I could definitely hear that. I'm curious too, what's the role of family education in the broader scale?
That's a great question. I think it plays a huge role, and I think that one of the things we can do as educators is to bring in families and encourage families and parents and siblings to be part of that educational process. So, because everybody's family life is different, and
Right.
some people grow up with, grow up in an environment where there's a lot of Jewish education at home, and some grow up in an environment where there isn't a lot of Jewish education. And I don't think that, I think whatever situation somebody happens to grow up in, I think it's our job to provide an environment where an educational environment, we can't, because we don't have control, and also the kids don't have control in the type of family setting. So what can we do? Well, we can provide opportunities for the whole family to learn.
Hopefully we can all, as educators, continue to offer that and continue to grow and, like you said, bring holiness to our lives, to the world.
Amen.
And God willing, we should move into a bright, peaceful future.
Amen.
And so grateful, Jackie, that you joined me this evening. And I really enjoyed getting to know you a bit more and your background. And thank you for the time.
Of course. Thank you. So nice talking to you, and hope to talk again soon.
Definitely. We should for sure reconnect.
Would love that.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, have a wonderful evening and Chodesh Tov.
Oh, you too.
Thank you.
Take care.